試下。
Members, thank you for coming to the panel on environmental affairs. It is the 23rd of June. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum. Let me call the meeting to order. Item 1 on the agenda. Sorry, before we start, I'd like to say that Ms. Sit Ho, the chairman, is now chairing another meeting, so she has asked me to stand in for her until about 3 o'clock. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. I'd like to ask members to endorse the minutes of the special meeting held on the 13th of March 2014 and another set held on the 24th of March 2014. Until this moment, the Secretariat and I myself have not received any amendments for correcting the minutes. If you do not have objection, we will endorse the minutes. Thank you. Number 2, our information papers issued since the last meeting. We did not have any. Number 3, items for discussion at the next meeting. Please look at the list of follow-up actions and list of outstanding items for discussion. The next meeting will be held on the 23rd of July, a Wednesday, at 2:30. The administration would like to propose 3 items for discussion. Number 1, district cooling system at the Kai Tak development. This has been discussed many times. I think you are familiar with it. Number 2, collaboration with Guangdong in improving air quality in the Pearl River Delta region. Number 3, report on the subcommittee on issues relating to air, noise and light pollution and the administration's response. The report of the subcommittee has been completed. It is a subcommittee under this bureau and the administration is now going to respond to the report for follow-up issues. Any questions? If not, and also, before the regular meeting, since we have many items to follow up, the chairman would like me to inform you that on the 25th of June and also the 17th of July, there will be 2 special meetings. On the 25th of June, Wednesday at 8:30 a.m., we are going to discuss the impact of infrastructural projects on important species, marine ecology and marine mammals. I think you have got the notice already because it is this Wednesday. And another one, the 17th of July, a Thursday at 2:30, the promotion of recycling industry and also the setting up of the recycle fund. I believe you have got the papers. Okay, if there are no questions, we'll go into the items for discussion today. Item 4, restored landfill revitalization funding scheme. Let us invite the administration team to come in first. I believe you've got the papers with you. I will invite the administration to make use of a PowerPoint to take you through the funding scheme. And then, if you have questions, I will certainly give you the floor in a moment. Welcome to you, Ms. Christine Low, Undersecretary for the Environment. Also, Mr. Howard Chan, Deputy Director of EPD. And then Dr. Alan Chan, AD, EPD. And also Mr. Francis Wong, Officer in Charge, EPD. Undersecretary, have you settled down? Okay, the floor is yours. Please be as brief as possible. Well, actually, allow us 5 to 6 minutes, please, to give you a very brief PowerPoint presentation. I believe this will assist members in understanding the topic and maybe ask questions later on. Dr. Chan? Yes. Apart from the 3 operating landfills, in Hong Kong there have been 13 closed landfills. They were used in the 70s and 80s and now they are all closed and restored. And in these 13 landfills, 6 have been developed for the public use. There are 7 others which will be put under this funding scheme for application. As you know, these are landfills, but there are technical restrictions. For example, there will be no piling, and we cannot afford to have multi-story buildings or really have very heavy developments. But actually, they can be used as open space, soccer pitches or playgrounds. And there are many good examples that I can show you. One in Sideshow 1 in Lam Tin. This was opened in 2004. As you can see, we have a baseball court and also a soccer pitch and also inside the building, we have a gallery for showing care for the environment, and another one in Ao Chi Wan, opened in 2010. You can see it looks like any other LCSD park. There are recreational features and also a jogging trail. A bigger one is the one in Jordan Valley Park in Kwun Tong. It was also opened in 2010. You can see a lot of greenery and a small scale go-kart racing track. And another example is that the Hong Kong Jockey Club actually supported the BMX to build an international BMX park in Gin Drinkers Bay Landfill. This was opened in 2009, and the East Asian Games also took part here. These are some successful examples. What about overseas examples? Their experience is more or less the same as Hong Kong's. They have also built golf courses, football pitches, and parks on restored landfills. In Hong Kong, if we only rely on such projects, the development may not be totally satisfactory because there are many public works projects that have to be done, and we may not be able to give priority to recreational projects. And therefore, we are very happy to hear that in the policy address this year, a 1 billion fund has been earmarked to launch a restored landfill revitalization funding scheme. We would like to invite non-profit making organizations or national sports associations to apply for funding under the scheme to develop recreational, environmental, or other community facilities on these sites. We welcome innovation. The objectives of the scheme are as detailed in the paper, but in a word, we'd like to put restored landfills into beneficial uses. Number 2, we like to expedite after uses of restored landfills. And number 3, we like to take the opportunity to promote active public participation in the form of NGOs on the development of restored landfills by coming forward with innovative ideas. As I said, there are 7 landfills which will be included in the scheme. They are the one in Ma Yau Tong Central in Kwun Tong, Ma Yau Tong West as well, and then Aotamei in Yuen Long, Pillar Point Valley in Tuen Mun, Silang Shui in Tuen Mun, Cheung Kwan O Stage 1, and then Cheung Kwan O Stage 2 and 3. These are the 7 landfills which can provide about 20 hectares of level land for NGOs to think about how to use them. For the sake of the scheme, we have already set up a steering committee, and in fact the first preparatory meeting has been held. The steering committee helps to develop rules and guidelines for application and also the assessment criteria. It will also help to publicize the scheme and invite applications. Then it will assess and approve applications. And if applications are approved, still a lot more has to be done. We have to monitor progress, the progress of construction and also progress of operation, etc. Lastly, we hope members will support our proposal in that the scope of funding will be like below. There will be a one-off capital grant for NGOs, which will be capped at $100 million to develop the beneficial uses. We understand that if the project is a little complicated, it may need money to do investigation or other advanced works like feasibility studies, etc. And that 100 million can include the consultancy expenses. Number 2, in January, February, we started to talk to the relevant organizations, and we consulted briefings to consult them, and then we got to know that in the initial stage of operation, these organizations might need financial help, or else they might have operating difficulty. So we propose to give a one-off grant to subsidize initial operation, subject to a cap of $5 million over a period of 2 years. Number 3, now how should we give them the land for them to use? We will make use of a land license. This is in line with the Land Miscellaneous Use Ordinance. If it is in Hong Kong and Kowloon, the nominal rental for a year would be $1. If it is in the new territories, we will charge a nominal fee of $10 per year regardless of the size of the sites. I hope members will support the scheme. Thank you.
Anything to add from the Undersecretary before I open up the floor? I'd like to remind all of you that if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interests, please follow the stipulations on the rules of procedure, Cap 58A, and members are urged to disclose the relevant interests. And the relevant regulations must be followed. We have 7 members who would like to ask questions, 5 minutes each. Tony Chair, Claudia Mo, Gary Fan, Leung Kai Cheung, Wu Chi Wai, Frankie Yik. Stephen Ho, please. We welcome this funding scheme for restored landfill revitalization, but I have some questions for the administration. We'd like to make use of these restored landfills for the agricultural technology transfers. According to the tables, the land lots available are relatively small. They are all under 5 or 6 hectares. Let's say we have a plot of land spanning 4.5 hectares. And under your scheme, can you give us, say, 20 hectares of land so that we can plan for bigger projects in the future? And according to the papers, you mentioned sports projects, and of course we are also supportive of these measures. But in terms of the assessment scheme, will you provide opportunities for organizations with innovative technologies? And according to the paper, the applicant must provide a certain deposit as guarantee. So in effect, are you limiting the chances for smaller organizations? Because some agricultural organizations might not have a lot of money and they need further support. It seems that you are really interested to apply. Do you have any, do you need to declare any interest? No. Who can answer this question on behalf of the government? Mr. Chan. We have 7 restored landfills, and the restoration works have all been completed, and most of them involve slopes, and these landfills might not be suitable for recreational or leisure uses. Right now we have 20 or 21 hectares of flat land which we can further develop. And in Cheung Kwan O we have almost 10 hectares of flat land, so we do have flat land. And the purpose of these restored landfills is not to provide more flat land, but they are for other uses. And going forward, several big landfills will be saturated very soon, and we will carry out restoration. And at that time, we would have more land for which we can put into use for the community. And we also had a discussion with the steering committee on the assessment criteria under the funding scheme. And benefits to the community is one of the important criteria. And this would certainly be taken into account. If an organization has innovative ideas to offer, we would certainly take these ideas into consideration. And on the cost, we don't have a fixed application fee. We will prepare guidelines on application and also application forms. Depending on the purpose and complexity of the applications, for relatively straightforward applications, for example, community farming lots, for relatively simple proposals, the applicants might not need to provide very detailed information, but for other projects like soccer pitches or other larger infrastructure, applicants might need to do more when they apply. And under this funding scheme, and for people who want to do something with the restored landfills, and certain risks are involved. And we need to carry out detailed site investigation. If the steering committee approves a certain application, we will consider providing a certain grants to the organizations to perform technical, more detailed technical assessments, and more funds are needed, and the government is prepared to offer funding. I'd like to declare my interest. The trade is very interested in applying for this scheme, but personally, I don't intend to apply. Mr. Tony Chair. Mr. Stephen Ho, you are representing the trade, right? The trade would like to take part, and that's why they have asked a lot of questions, and they are requesting more information. Members, we're in the middle of meeting. Please don't have side conversations. Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. And I support the idea of mobilizing resources in the restored landfill revitalization scheme. And under the paper, under C2 of item number 7, certain criteria were listed out. So has the government thought about the weights given to these different criteria? Do these criteria carry different weights? This is something I'd like to know. And on the funding scope, and for non-recurrent funding, non-recurrent expenditure, for preliminary assessments, if an applicant receives funding for preliminary investigation and yet the project doesn't continue, what would you do? And earlier, the government said they would issue land licenses, and these licenses would carry certain time spans. And if the leases have expired, and if the organizer does not intend to continue, is the applicant obliged to restore the site to its original state? Who can answer this question? Deputy Director. Well, I'll answer the first two questions, and I'll have Dr. Chen answer the third question. First, the weights of the criteria. When you look at item 7, paragraph C2, we have 4 different criteria. And these 4 criteria are equally important. At this stage, we have not assigned weights to these criteria. And in response to Tony Chair's question, the capability of applicants, this is very important. If the applicant has a very good proposal, But if we feel that they might not have the capability to carry it out, we might not necessarily approve this application. And other factors like technical feasibility or environmental impacts, these are all very important. And the steering committee will consider all these 4 criteria when they consider the applications. And all these criteria are equally crucial. And going forward, we would have detailed assessment criteria, and we would inform the applicants later on of details of our consideration and on the scope of funding. For the first 2 years, we would have a grant to cover the operating expenses, and after the first 2 years, it will be self-financing. And one important criterion is whether the project can sustain itself on the long run without government funding. And as such, when we hope applicants can conduct financial assessments and make sure that they're self-financing. And through this assessment, we can avoid scenarios in which certain projects might be discontinued because of financial reasons. And after the steering committee approves an application, we would follow up on the progress of the project. And next, I'll hand over to Dr. Chen. And on the land lease expiry period, we would look at it case by case. Some organizations might not need a very long lease, and perhaps 3 to 5 years would be enough. And for other projects, we can consider 5 or 20 years. And if an applicant wants to build a soccer pitch or other structures, do we have to make it clear? Does the applicant have to restore the landfill to its original state if they are not the operator anymore? Let's say if someone builds a soccer pitch, 20 years later, does the applicant have to restore its the landfill to its original state? We have to look at the relevant land ordinances. If the structure has been operating without problem, then we might not need to. We might not require them to restore it to the original state. Just now, it seems that the agricultural trade is interested in applying for this funding scheme. So can we build some new farming lots? Can we introduce farming lots at these sites? This is my first question. The second question, according to your paper, a lot of applicants would like to build golf courses, and this is very interesting. Can we introduce flea markets or hawkers markets? We've had meetings on public markets and hawkers. This is these issues have given us a big headache. A lot of people and departments are concerned with these issues, and yet no one wants to take charge. So these landfills are possibly a solution for the people of Hong Kong. And third, I'm still very concerned with the assessment criteria. Can we have external assessors? After the Hong Kong Dragon and Lion Dance Festival, we are very wary of these problems. Would you have independent public accountants to take care of your accounts? We are really concerned that there might be a conflict of interest. And let me respond to the first question. What are we going to do with these respawn landfills? We have learned from other countries that they could be used for golf courses. I'm talking about farming lots, farming land. I'm talking about land agriculture or horticulture. I understand that I know about horticulture, but what about land farming? We wouldn't encourage land farming because, after all, they are restored landfills. But after detailed assessments, we wouldn't discount such options. And on the second question, flea markets or hawkers markets, we would grant these landfills to non-profit organizations. If the applicant intends to launch a market, then we would consider such proposals. Can we turn these landfills into profitable markets, profit-making markets? Right now, they are saying that they would only give these landfills to non-profit organizations.
I understand these landfills are more remote. I don't know whether they will become popular. You're correct, Chairman. These restored landfills are quite remote. They are not close to residential developments. They may not be totally accessible. But just now, you said there will be 20 hectares of level land. Ms. Mo, please do not interject, because he's just repeating himself. 20 hectares of level land. Have you finished? Yes, I have. Mr. Chen, I'd like to further respond. As a member has already asked, the 20 hectares is not in one site. It is dispersed over 7 sites, and some of them may be on a slope, and some sites are bigger than others. We will have to look at the applications, and then we'll have to do a technical assessment before we can give any proposal a consideration. We have set up the steering committee, which is made up of by non-officials. There are engineers, accountants, architects, and also community organizations as well. Sorry, I don't have more time. Can I just ask you one question? We are talking about each project being given $100 million. Would this become a pork barreling exercise? No. The ICAC will watch over our assessment criteria. Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you, Chairman. In terms of the use of land, the search for land, especially to tackle the housing problem, and also how to reprovision villages on land, there have been a lot of controversy. One of the objectives of your project is to make the best use of restored landfills, and Dr. Chan said that you would like to encourage innovation. Now, I'd like you to give this more flexibility. Can you have interdepartmental frameworks set up? In terms of the use of land, you can actually link this up with other departments' work. I'm not talking about innovation, but rather controversial developmental projects. I'm talking about clubs. The HAP always talks about these private clubs, which are charged nominal rental of $1, $10, or $1,000, and some even have their rents waived. For example, the cricket club on Cox's Road in Jordan, and you only walk 5 to 10 minutes from an MTR station, and of course they only serve the rich and famous. My question is, if some of these controversial land uses in busy built-up areas can be put an end to, and then in restored landfills, you move such private clubs to landfills. Have you thought about this? Is this possible? And if you have, I believe the entire framework has to be redrafted. It is not for any applications from the community, but rather it will be a top-down approach. The administration will talk to the operators of the clubs, tell them that they should release the land and move away. And also, Ms. Claudia Mo asked a very valid question. In Fanling, there are 3 golf courses. As long as you take one back, you will be able to take care of 80% or even 100% of the housing to be provided by the NTNE development as set by the CE. I mean, you should apply new mentality to such, because you can take the proactive approach and make efforts in order to tackle these controversial projects in the community, instead of what you are saying that the objective is to promote active public participation. But we want you to actively participate in controversial community projects. I'm sure this will be welcomed by the public, who will take up the question. Under Secretary. Restored landfills have restrictions. It is not that they can be used for anything, and also they are in a way not accessible. You can say these are the 2 constraints. Now, can we think along the line you proposed? Even so, if there are groups which want to make use of landfills to further their aims, they should be allowed and be able to come along and apply. No, the crux of the matter is you ask people to actively participate, but then you actively give up your administrative work in taking back land from the private clubs. I mean, if you take up the initiative and talk to these operators of private clubs, then the entire picture will be quite different. I don't want you to sit there and be passive and promote active participation by the public, but you actively participate in this project. Gary Fan, can I then ask you a question? Now you know this is what the scheme is going to be like. Which organizations do you think, and what uses can you think of? Well, I can write to the administration again. There are a few private clubs which I think can be moved to these landfills. Please do not talk among yourselves. I am chairing the meeting. Chairman, I saw you nod your head. I thought you were allowing me to continue. Well, you were looking at her. How come you looked at me? Well, I could see you even if I was looking at her. What are your proposals? I was talking about the Kowloon Cricket Club, and there are 20-odd such clubs in society, Chairman. Over 20. Can we do something about the cricket club? Well, Chairman, let me do this. Well, actually, the clubs are like a cottage. They are just 1 story high. Chairman, let's do this. If Mr. Gary Fan has some particular views, maybe he can write in so we can consider it. Next one, Mr. Kenneth Chan. Thank you, Chairman. After the mega event fund hearing of the PAC, I think I have reservations towards these schemes. You asked recreational or non-profit making organizations to apply, but are there many such organizations which have business experience so they can organize these projects? And we are talking about $100 million each. And this scheme will amount to $1 billion. The mega event fund only has $150 million, and every time they only give $2 to $3 million to a project, and yet such big problems can arise. You say you have the steering committee, but how do you monitor the non-profit making organizations to make sure they do a good deed or a good job? And also, I don't know why you want to set up a funding scheme. Is it that you want to wash your hands of it? In fact, you have more resources in your hands. You talked about restore landfills. If there is no other complement that it is with low accessibility, then why do you think these applying organizations can make them useful if they are not accessible? This is my worry. Who can take up the question? Mr. Chan. Okay, on monitoring, as I said, the applicant has to write a proposal, and then it has to, first of all, conduct certain studies. After approval in principle is given, the applicant may have to engage a consultant to do a detailed technical feasibility study, which will help to thresh out their proposal and to prove that it is technically feasible and environmentally possible. As to the complexity of the application, it is to be decided by the applicants. The cap of funding is $100 million each, but I believe simple applications may not be complex, and the operation may not be complex either. Therefore, when we held a few briefings earlier in the year, 40 organizations with over 100 people came. If they would come up with simpler applications, I'm sure they would be able to build them and operate them, like farm plots or open space or a park. And an organization may build something for rehabilitated disabled people. We are not talking about very experienced organizations. But I don't understand why the cap has to be set at $100 million. How did you come up with that figure? You say the applications may be simple. It may be for an organization for building a park or a rehabilitation land. If it is a park, why don't you do it? Why do you want to set up a funding scheme? If the uses are to be limited to a golf course, a lawn, or a cycle track, why don't you build them and then get people to operate them? That would be much simpler. Undersecretary, why doesn't the administration do it? I think this is also a way for NGOs or non-profit making organizations, or NPOs that is, and also NSAs to do something. Sports is a specialty. In fact, these organizations have told us that they are interested. So it is not for us to build a soccer pitch or an archery ground. If these people already know how to operate such facilities, and if they can come up with a business plan, then we'd like to subsidize them. We think that would be more effective instead of having the government operate it. No, I'm thinking of another mode. The hardware can be provided by you, but the management and operation can be done by somebody else. I don't know whether you have a collaborating scheme, or do you just give them the money and then they will do it on their own? And how do you monitor their performance? Chairman, we can explain in more detail here. Mr. Chen, let me add. If it is a public works project, then every year, in terms of funding, we need to compete for resources. So if we regard this as a public works project, we may not be able to get the resources to support it after a long time. But these are restored landfills. We'd like to make use of them ASAP, and we'd like the community to take part in putting them to beneficial use. So we are earmarking $1 billion for this purpose. This is extra funding from the government. We don't need to go through the RAE every year to get resources. Next one, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. If you look at the PowerPoint, Ao Chi Wan Park, Jordan Valley Park, they were opened in 2010. At that time, the price tag was over $200 million each. Now you give people $100 million, and given today's prices, when government projects are much more expensive, $100 million cannot do a lot. Can you really build something on 1 hectare, 2 hectares, or 4.5 hectares? I have great doubts about this. This is the first point, and I hope the public will not misunderstand that $100 million will give you this beautiful park, because in the end you can only build a lawn. Number two, is it that some organizations have already approached you in order to temporarily hire such sites for use? Have they come forward already? Because if it is just for temporary rental, there would not be so many restrictions. Then the organizations may be able to do what they want to do with limited resources. They may build a lawn, and then they can use it for baseball practice. That can be simple, but then if they get $100 million from the government, there will be so much more to do, because you will have so many requirements on them. You want to have the facility open to the public, and then they have to do consultancy study, and the entire game will be different. I agree with Mr. Kenneth Chan. If you want to build something for the public, then it must be provided by you. And then you can get an operator in, and maybe you can only ask for the views, and then you still provide the hardware, and the management can then be contracted out. I think that would be more reasonable, instead of giving people $100 million and then you can have $5 million to operate for the first 2 years, etc. Well, this is a repeat of the enhancing self-reliance through district participation. The CS4A said 95% of those projects experienced a loss. So does it mean that now we want to spend $1 billion and then for 95% of the cases we are going to sustain a loss? And when the restored landfills will become a wasteland, and then you have to fork out money to restore them again?
Another question is that we should think about the question Ms. Claudia Mo asked. These sites have specific site use requirements. And for Ngao Chi Wan landfill, it's so big, and yet we could only manage build a toilet and a changing room, and we cannot achieve what Ms. Claudia Mo said. So as the paper suggested, then it might be better. It might better be used for a golf course or a bike trail. And why are we making things more complicated than they need to be? And would these would this 1 billion become a repeat of the enhancement scheme? When you look at the organizations which have attended our meetings, you can see that they have a lot of things to say. It's not just the golf courses. In the past, different sports associations and, for example, baseball clubs, soccer clubs, cricket, baseball clubs, they have approached us, and they are looking for more practice pitches in order to promote their respective sports to the public. And certain welfare associations also have other ideas. And they might have different ideas for recreational and other ideas. Would you consider the approach of temporary renting? Are you going to open up the venues, or are you going to place restrictions? We don't support the idea of temporary rental. If we rent it out for a few months, the organizations might not be able to do much. I'm not talking about a few months, so don't put that on me. Mr. Frankie, I'm quite optimistic of this funding scheme because I know of organizations which are eligible for applying. From your paper, you haven't mentioned what applicants can or cannot build at these sites. Can you make this clear? In the future, can you provide more figures and information on what applicants can or cannot build and what is the maximum load, etc.? And just now, Mr. Tony Chair mentioned the lease period of the licenses. If the lease periods are too short, then it's worthless to the applicants. Third, when you look at the feasibility of the applications, how long are you looking at? Certain NGOs rely on donations from the community. So, what is the period you are looking at? If you ask the applicant to prove that the project would be sustainable within 20 years, then it might be difficult. I think the onus is on the applicant because only the applicant knows how long he or she intends to use this plot of land. For example, for farm lots, the applicant might need 5 years, and in such cases, we would require the applicant to prove that the project can be self-sustaining within 5 years. In future briefings, we would make ourselves very clear on what applicants can or cannot build at these sites. Certain facilities like bathrooms or bike trails, these are still infrastructure projects. And technically, we would have maximum loads, maximum load requirements for these sites. We would provide these information to participants in the future. I have a follow-up question. And for the land licenses, are you going to follow the STT requirements, the short-term tenancies? The land leases would follow the land provisions, regulations, and for urban areas it's $10 a year, and for rural areas it's $1 a year. When are you going to have your next briefings? We are drawing up guidelines for applicants as well as assessment guidelines, and by the end of this year we would invite interested applicants. In the meantime, we will host briefing sessions and as well as a dedicated website. How many briefings have you done? In January and February, we had 2 briefings, and in March, we conducted 3 site visits, and we will continue our work in the future. I don't even know that 2 briefings have been done. So next time, please inform Mr. Frankie Yik. All right. Any follow-up questions? Next round, we have Mr. Stephen Ho and Gary Fan. 2 minutes each. Mr. Gary Fan. I'll be quick. The information provided is very incomplete. And for the Cheung Kwan O Phase 1 restored landfill, years ago, the Football Association already expressed their interest in building practice pitches and a football academy. So what happened with the football academy? if the Hong Kong Football Association had not managed to secure this projects, what can other associations do? I was taught by my university professor that if the professor is not able to solicit answers from his students, then he might come back on it later or use another approach. So you are just trying to buy time. For government-driven projects, you suggested that the government should approach these associations, and in effect, this is something we are doing now. Perhaps we can cover a wider space, a wider area, and invite more associations. And so that's why I asked if you have certain associations or organizations in mind which might be interested in this scheme, we are happy to invite them. What about the Football Academy? Some organizations were interested in building a football academy at the Tranquillo site, but as far as we know, because of cost restraints, that they didn't continue their pursuits. Mr. Wuchiwai. This funding scheme is intended for national sports associations and non-profit organizations, and the biggest constraint is that they must be non-profit making. And in under such premises, how can they have a so-called business plan to be self-sustaining in the future? And if they cannot run on a commercial principle, how can they operate on the long term? In the last 5 years, have you received any concrete applications? And have you approved any applications or proposals in principle? And if so, can you show us some of these proposals so that we know what is going on? And if the Football Association could not materialize their projects, what can other organizations do? Who can answer this question? Mr. Chen. Even these non-profit organizations can charge fees for certain operations. However, the point is they cannot make profits. We would assess the financial arrangements of these NPOs, and we would look at whether these how these organizations can make money. Chairman, even the LCSD cannot be self-sustaining. How can you expect these organizations to be self-sustaining? We have received inquiries on possible uses of these landfills for sports activities, and the applicants were confident that they can be self-financing. The only stumbling block is the startup fees, and as such, this funding scheme would be very helpful to them. I'd like to follow up on the questions asked by Mr. Wuchiwai. Let's say if I'm applying for the fund and I would like to build something. If I cannot fulfill my promises within a certain time frame, let's say I'm able to secure 50 million for shooting range, but at the end I could not materialize this project. How are you going to take this money back, and how are you going to release these landfills for other organizations? Dr. Chen. And this is exactly the reason we have to be very careful and specific in our guidelines, and this is something we are working on right now. We wouldn't disseminate the funds in one go, and we would monitor the progress of the projects. If there are any delays or if the applicant is not capable of realizing the project, then we would take action. Similar to the arrangements is similar to contractual agreements. So we are not at that stage yet. For this 1 billion, some landfills were already taken and they've been abandoned for 10 years, and nothing has been done on these sites, at these sites. So what would the government do? We still have time. If there are no objections, Mr. Albert Chan, I'd like to let Mr. Albert Chan ask a question as well. So thank you very much, Chairman. For landfills, the government should adopt creative thinking. For Gin Drinkers Bay, we have had discussions on what we should do with it. Some people were saying that it could be used for a depot for a ground for containers. So we shouldn't continue to waste time and money with these sites. These restored landfills can be used for purposes other than leisure and recreational uses. These sites can be used for to build huts. And of course, some of these sites might not be safe for residential purposes.
The best thing to do is to ask C.Y. Leung and Paul Chen to go there and live. Now, I'm not sure whether this is the best way to develop them. I think you should look at the users first. You could delve into multifarious possibilities. And then let me mention in passing that in Hapag Lai, there are so many flies that they are scary. Secretary, Undersecretary, every time you are only strict when you apply for funding, but after funding is given, you become very relaxed. Now the weather is hot and humid, and people will use the fly traps, and in a few minutes they would be full of flies. I should take them here to alert you to the plight of the public. You sit in air-conditioned rooms, you get your salaries every month, but the residents are day in, day out disturbed, and they cry out for help, but nobody listens to them. After this meeting, I hope you will tackle the fly problem in Hapag Lai. It is an environmental hygiene problem. If there is one fly caught, you should have your salary cut by $10,000, and I'm sure you will have nothing at the end of the month. Okay, coming back to the use of landfills, I basically object to it. I'm asking you whether you would have multiple uses in your head. Mr. Chan, we have an open mind about the uses of the landfills. But first of all, of course, we have to look at methane gas problems. One of the assessment criteria will be the acceptability of the use to residents in the district. We will consult district councils and people in the districts. If there will just be recreational or community facilities, I believe they will be welcomed by people in the districts. We'll go in that direction. But that may not always be the case. Even recreational facilities may have light pollution for people living around it. And landfills may not totally be in the open. If you are going to build structures on them, maybe it is a more cost-effective way of using the landfills. So I hope you will really have an open kind of consultation and ask organizations to come up with possible uses. As I was talking about Gin Drinkers Bay, the best thing to do is to have it used as container truck parking. I think it will give you a win-win-win situation. Don't limit your choices to cultural and recreational facilities, because in the end you have to plow in more money. Who can answer the question? In 7C2 of the paper, I have already listed the criteria. As long as it is innovative, we will be willing to consider it. As to the operation of the landfills, cut out the nonsense. Go back and look at Hapag Lai. In fact, the Hapag Lai VR and other people are on the committee on the supervision of landfills. Why don't you go and do a site visit today and then write back to the chairman? Don't just say something and not do anything, or else I'll send you some flies. Okay, I think all members have spoken. I have received 2 motions without notice from Mr. Gary Fan, and I have allowed those to be voted on. I think they are being photocopied for members. Would you like to wait for the actual wording first, or would you like Mr. Gary Fan just to read out the motions? You agree? Mr. Gary Fan, please read out your motion slowly. I don't have it with me. I just wrote it out, so I'm really speaking from memory. That this panel urge the administration to consider resuming urban land which can be used for housing but which is being used by private clubs, and make use of restored landfills to reprovision such private clubs. This is the first motion. What about the next one? Good. This panel urged the administration to consider resuming one of the 3 golf courses in Fan Ling and use it for the building of flats, and the restored Plover Cove landfill should be used to reprovision one of the 3 golf courses in Fan Ling. Okay. Do you want to read the motions in black and white first? Okay, let us wait for the photocopies to be available. I will tackle the other item first. I don't want to waste your time because the item has to be submitted to the Finance Committee. I'd like to ask members whether anyone objects to submitting the paper to the Finance Committee. If you don't allow a bazaar to be built, I would object. 5 are in objection. How many are in support? 3. Under Secretary, I think you have to go back and study the paper again. The paper is not proposing to submit the paper to the Finance Committee for funding support. It is very clear that members have that inclination, and we have told you our worries. Okay, let us wait for the 2 motions to come back. Let us adjourn for 1 minute. All right, we'll adjourn for 1 minute so we can get the photocopies of the 2 motions without notice.
我哋開返會啦，好嗎？
Let's resume. The two motions without notice are being distributed to you, both moved by Mr. Gary Fan. When members have each got a copy, I will put the motions to the vote.
而家呢就先表決。
First, we'll vote on the motion with the number 1 at the bottom right-hand corner, that this panel urged the administration to resume land in the urban area which can be used for housing but are used by private clubs, and to reprovision the private clubs to restored landfills. Those who are in favor, Mr. Fan claims a division. Well, never mind. Let's be quick. Let's just have a show of hands. Those in support? 4. Okay, you have written that down. Mr. Wu Chi Wai, Miss Claudia Mo, Mr. Gary Chan, and also Mr. Albert Chan. Those in objection? Chen Kin Po, Frankie Yik, Stephen Ho, Christopher Chong, Dr. Vincent Fang, Tony Jie, Wong Ting Kwong, Chen Han Pan. 8-4. The motion is vetoed. The next one. This is also a motion without notice moved by Mr. Gary Fan. This is number 2, that this panel urged the administration to resume one of the 3 golf courses in Fanling for the building of residential flats and make use of the restored Plover Cove landfill to reprovision one of the 3 golf courses in Fanling. Those in support, 4 votes. Mr. Gary Fan claims a division, and they are Mr. Gilbert Chan, Mr. Gary Fan, Ms. Claudia Mo, and another member. Those in objection, Chen Kin Po, Frankie Yik, Stephen Ho, Christopher Chung, Vincent Fang, Tony Che, Wong Ting Kwong, Chen Han Pan. 8-4. The motion is not carried. Okay, let's go into item 5 of the agenda. Strengthened emission control of petrol and liquefied petroleum gas vehicles. Can I please invite the relevant officials to come in? Again, we have Ms. Christine Low, Undersecretary for the Environment, and then Mr. Andrew Lai, DD of EPD, Mr. Mok Wai Chun, AD of EPD. We also have Mr. Fong Kin Hua, PEPO from the EPD, and Mr. Yam Yet Shing, SEPO from the EPD. Before I allow members to ask questions, can I ask the officials to take us through the paper briefly? Please be very brief, because our colleagues are very diligent. I think they must have read the papers already. Who will be responsible for briefing us?
I'm sure many of you are familiar with this topic, and for LPG taxis and light buses, their catalytic converters have been replaced. In the future, we will have sensors to measure emissions roadside. And hopefully this program can be launched on the 1st of September. The details have been laid out in the paper, so perhaps we'll allow time for the members to ask questions. Right now we have Mr. Frankie Yik, followed by Mr. Albert Chan. 5 minutes each, please. Mr. Yik. I have 3 questions. According to the trade, after installing the catalytic converters and the dynamometers, there is a problem of there is a motor problem. After installing the catalytic converters and oxygen sensors from our past research, and research have shown that the motors the vehicles would operate more stably, and 15%, a 15% saving in fuels can be achieved. And all along, we have been reminding the trade that in maintaining LPG vehicles, owners should pay special attention to the maintenance of certain parts, including the LPG distillers, and there is tar at that part, and you have to clear up the tar regularly, or else there could be problems with the exhaust. And there is another part where the fuel would meet the air, and you have to keep that part clear in order to keep the motor running. And you also have to clean the waste air pipe. We will prepare pamphlets for car repairers and car owners, and these pamphlets have been distributed to the trade, and the information has been laid out on our website as well. Thank you very much. So please clarify on these information. And I've also been told by the trade that after installing the catalytic converters and oxygen sensors, there are lists of things they have to pay attention to. You said you are going to introduce infrared testing. And if they are caught by the government, and some of them might feel aggrieved, and the owners might be worried that they would be arrested, and if their vehicles have to be sent for testing, then it would affect their livelihoods. So this is their concern. So can you further clarify this issue with the trade to alleviate their concerns? And I also have worries for vehicle owners. And after you introduce roadside testing, the transportation department doesn't have enough, doesn't have the right equipment to carry out the testing. And if my vehicle is caught by the government and my car is sent for testing, then it would affect the owner. In the future, can you solve this problem by having all the equipment tested in one go? For your second and third questions, our approach is similar. We want to send a message to the car owners and repairers. Right now, we are providing free testing for car owners to educate them on what they have to test. And we understand that a lot of owners hand their vehicles to testing centers for testing. And we have been communicating with testing centers on things they have to pay attention to after the new testing is in place. We will have briefing sessions for car owners and testing centers, and we'll remind them on maintenance issues for vehicles. Even though the owners might not do the maintenance themselves, it's good for them to know more about the procedures. So this is the message we want to bring across to owners. Mr. Albert Chen. And on the conversion to LPG vehicles, I understand that recently a lot of there is congestion in a lot of oil stations. Do we face such? Do we still face such problems now? Earlier, we've looked at the operation of gas stations with taxi drivers. if the gas stations have all their equipment running smoothly, then there wouldn't be any problem of congestion. We've also met the operators of certain gas stations. They would redeploy their manpower and carry out preventative maintenance in order to avoid problems during the rush hours. And these measures should improve the situation at the gas stations. And according to the trade, the gas stations have been running smoothly. How about the figures of for gas stations? Do the figures deviate from what you expected in the past? We will build 12 designated gas stations, and there will also be non-designated gas stations, and through these provisions we will provide service to the trade. Do certain districts still face congestion at the gas stations? What kind of measures do you have in place to avoid congestion? We have met the trade recently, and their opinion is that we have enough gas stations already. However, during the rush hours, they're hoping for more designated gas stations. We should have it doesn't hurt to have more designated gas stations, right? Having more gas stations wouldn't do any harm. We are taking a dual approach. While introducing more dedicated gas stations, and we would also ask other existing gas stations to provide the service. So are you asking all new gas stations to be equipped with such services? And for petrol, LPG, and electric vehicles, have you conducted any studies on the cost effectiveness of all these vehicles? If electric vehicles are found to be effective, are you going to promote them in the future? All along, we have been looking at the technological developments of different kinds of vehicles. First of all, I'll look at the issue from an environmental impact point of view. The emissions from petrol and LPG vehicles are similar. And if we are to build LPG gas filling stations in Hong Kong, we face certain limitations. Hong Kong is relatively congested, and these gas filling stations must be stationed away from residents. And it would be very difficult for us to build these stations, especially for private vehicles. What about light passenger vehicles running on diesel? For diesel vans, we have studied the possibility of converting them into LPG vehicles. If I'm correct, there are 50 or almost 60,000 diesel vans. We have about 60,000 taxis, and we have 4,000 and so light buses. And in terms of LPG infrastructure, and it's very difficult for us to keep up with the demand of 50 or 60,000 vans. I'm only asking for a study. You should conduct a survey. If you're satisfied with the taxis and light buses, you should tackle the issue with light buses as well. I understand that it wouldn't happen overnight, but I'm only asking you to do something. So time's up, Mr. Albert Chan. Perhaps you can wait for the next round. First, I'd like to thank the Vice Chairman to stand in for me for half the meeting. According to the news, at each site there would be 2 sets of mobile remote sensing equipment. If the government arranges to have 2 sets of equipment at each site in order to minimize error, what is the margin of error of this equipment? How are you going to avoid false detections? Why do you need 2 sets of equipment at each site rather than 1? And you have 3 pilot sites. So does it mean you have 6 sets of mobile remote sensing equipment? So how did you choose these sites? And where are you going to place these equipment? And on the issue of emissions, if vehicles start or stop at slopes, are they going to emit more pollutants? Can you further elaborate, please? And if the gases are contaminated, this has nothing to do with the owner, but the quality of the gases. Would it lead to non-compatible emissions? So perhaps I will try to answer these questions, and my colleagues can add more if they wish. First, on the accuracy of the mobile remote sensing equipment, before I answer this question, why we need 2 sets of equipment at each site, I would first explain why we are confident with our equipment. I just feel that you are not confident because you need 2 sets at each location. I'll talk about the purpose of placing such equipment first. And then I will talk about the accuracy. First, in terms of design, we have precedents overseas on the design standards. In California, there is a specific set of standards, and in Hong Kong, we also have to meet this bar standard. And these roadside equipments have a self-calibration mechanism. And the reason why we need 2 sets of equipment is the purpose is to play safe. We want to reassure drivers that we have 2 sets of equipment and we can avoid cases of inaccuracy detection.
In fact, this has been done at international seminars, and the technical seminars have proposed such arrangements, and experts think that this is a good way to do it, because if you have 2 machines and when the public are worried, they will know that there are 2 machines and they are designed to international standards, and they automatically also calibrate themselves regularly. Then this is to assure the public. This will help to make the machines credible. As for the locations, how do we choose the locations? First of all, when we put out these calibrators. Let me use a little time to explain how the dynamometer works. On one side, it will emit ultraviolet or infrared light rays. When cars go by, these rays will pass through the emission clouds, and then these will be reflected onto a mirror, and then we can see the frequency change on the charts, so we understand the concentration of the pollutants. Mr. Mock, since I am the chairman, I will also have to be strict with myself. I'd like to ask members whether you would like Mr. Mock to continue, because I think the information will be beneficial to us all. I have another meeting at 4 o'clock. Could you please allow me to ask a question first? Okay, you can continue with your explanation later. In fact, my question is related. Why do you allow 12 days for rectifying the vehicle? How did you come up with this figure of 12? Is that a reasonable time period? And also, is there an appeal mechanism? I'm just asking these questions. You can use the rest of my time to answer the chairman's question. Thank you, Mr. Chan. 12 working days, because the car owner needs time to get his vehicle repaired. In fact, we already have a polluting vehicle control program, and under that program, car owners are also given 12 working days to do the repair. In fact, both schemes are quite similar. One has to do with the exhaust and soot. The other one, this one, it is just that we cannot see the pollutant. And also, we have a complaint handling mechanism. If a car owner receives a notice to have his car tested, and if he thinks that his car should not be the subject of any excessive emission, then they will be able to dial a number, because a number will be in that notice. He doesn't have to take his vehicle for examination, but he should call us up first. We will see what kind of repair he has done for his car, so that he is of the view that his car is not emitting excessively. And also, since we are using a device to check the exhaust, and everything is recorded on computer, and we'll check if our devices are working properly. If our devices are functioning properly, and if the car owner cannot supply any evidence, then we cannot just trust him. However, if we should discover some problem with our device, and if we have heard him say something, then we will ask him to come along, and then we will examine the car ourselves. This is actually the existing arrangement. Chairman, can I get on with my explanation? Please be brief. Where do you put these dynamometers? Okay, I was talking about reflection of the rays, and I will place these dynamometers on single-lane, one-way roads, because we don't want any confusion. In fact, there are quite a number of these roads where we can put these dynamometers. At the beginning, we would place them at 3 locations every day to check which cars are giving out excessive emission. If we should find that happening, then we can issue a notice for the car owner to have his car repaired or checked within 12 days. And you also talk about the quality of the fuel. It's true that we have found that there are companies which had a fuel quality problem. It's true that the quality of the fuel has an impact on the emission. But if that's the case, it will not just affect 1 car or 2 cars. And it will be easy for us to detect that. So you can rest assured. If indeed the pollution is from the fuel, then we will not trace that to the machinery of the cars. Okay, you will go to the Finance Committee for funding support. And afterwards, do you need to entrench this in legislation? Chairman, we don't need any money. We have it already. Last time, the EAP supported us to get resources to change the catalytic converters once for LPG taxis and light buses. We have done that already. And I also thank the EAP for supporting us in the past. And that is after replacing the converters, we can get on to this one. And today we are just reporting to the panel the progress of our work. And most importantly, from the 1st of September, we are going to place these roadside dynamometers. And we don't need any legislation. The Commissioner for Transport will have to issue a code of practice, including the standard of the emission. And that has been done already. Mr. Wu Chiwai? Thank you, Chairman. We're talking about air quality, and recently I see reports saying that there are more types of Euro 5 diesel private vehicles. In other words, there are more private vehicles which now run on diesel. I'd like to clarify this. I'd like to know how diesel vehicles at Euro 5 standard will affect air quality. Is it that by using Euro 5 diesel cars we can have better air quality because we don't charge any fuel tax on diesel? If people have this choice and they go for these cars, however, if these cars are not doing anything good to the air quality, then we have to plug this loophole. And the reverse is also true. If there are other types of vehicles which are becoming more environmentally friendly, LPG taxis have been with us for over a decade. Can they now choose to go for Euro 5, Euro 6 taxis? So they do not have to be limited to LPG. The same can go for light buses. Mr. Mock. Very often, the public and the sectors may get confused, saying that Euro 5 and Euro 6 only apply to diesel cars. But actually, Euro 5 and Euro 6 also apply to petrol and LPG cars. In answering this question, I'll take up the first question first, but of course, the second question is similar to the first. When diesel vehicles operate, there will be more NOx and also particulates emitted into the air. These are characteristics of diesel vehicles. In 1999, if I remember correctly, maybe in 1989, we have already legislated for this. If it is a private car, the diesel private car emission performance must be at a par with a petrol private car before it can be registered for the first time because they emit a lot of NOx and particulates. But now technology has advanced. Now we have Euro 5 diesel private cars. In Europe, we also have Euro 6 diesel private cars. Some of them are also in Hong Kong. With regard to Euro 6 diesel private cars, some which are of better models, their emission performance can be as good as Euro 5 petrol private cars. So you can see that there is a small number of diesel private cars in the market because they can reach the same emission performance standard of petrol private cars. To us, we have to do the gatekeeping, and that is the emission standard must be the same as petrol private cars. Okay? And then taxis, they are in a similar situation. In the law, taxis should use LPG or petrol. But today, we still do not see any diesel taxis which can perform as well as LPG or petrol taxis. I'm talking about emission performance. But all along, we are watching the advance of technology. It is not that we don't like diesel cars. We just don't want to have polluting diesel cars coming into Hong Kong to be used as taxis or PLBs. That is why we are watching the technology and how it is evolving and whether we need to adjust anything. There was a question asked by Mr. Wu Chi-wai which has not been answered. Coming back to LPG taxis and PLBs, they have been with us for over a decade, but the emission standard has been enhanced, just like that for diesel vehicles. So if people want to introduce LPG taxis starting from mid-2012, we also ask them to comply with Euro 5 standards. So we are not using standards that are a decade old. Well, I must ask them to clarify something. You are telling me that today, newly imported diesel private cars into Hong Kong should perform even better or at least be the same as petrol cars vis-a-vis the emission standards. Is that right? Yes. I'm just worried about the trend, because it's 1/3 cheaper in terms of fuel prices. And it will be attractive to car owners who would choose the diesel cars. Right. In future, if diesel emission performance will be good, I can't see why taxis and PLBs have to use or must use LPG. Well, that is why I asked for the clarification, because it seems LPG is written into the law. Right. That's why the administration also has to move with the times. Over a decade ago, in 98, 99, diesel performance was very bad, so they introduced LPG. But if now diesel performance has caught up, and we don't want to see any monopoly in the market because there are just one or two LPG car manufacturers, I believe members will support our requesting the administration to review the law. And you should have a performance-based approach and don't just blindly go for LPG. After all, the LPG vehicles are now old. I think you should reopen the matter for review. Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to refer to an audit report number 59. I think the Undersecretary knows this very well because in 2012 I took this up with you. A paragraph in it says, this is about LPG emission. I'd like to mention certain figures to remind the Undersecretary. If LPG, PLBs and taxis, if the converters are used for over 18 months without replacement, then LPG emissions, especially with regard to NOx, that will be multiplied by 10 times. This is reported by the Commissioner for Audit. And also in 2012, LPG taxis and PLBs totally emitted 40% of NOx. If actually in the long term, LPG cars may not be the most environmentally friendly car, because if you look at Europe cities like Paris or Milan, they would go for electric taxis, electric private cars. I don't know about the feasibility of electric PLBs. Right now, we use LPG, and I believe it cannot be replaced easily. Mr. Wu Chi-wai and the chairman said that if diesel performance is almost as good, then perhaps we can provide the incentive for people to use diesel cars. But in, say, 10, 15 years, I am talking about private cars, taxis, or PLBs. If we can go for electric cars and have them replace all other types of cars, can we do that?
Have you thought about these alternatives, and are you going to conduct a detailed survey? And I think this is the way to go in a congestion city such as Hong Kong. Can we have electric vehicles for these types of cars? And we are pilot testing some taxis. But I think the key is that the operators must find convenience in such alternatives. And the second is the cost. So perhaps Mr. Mock, as an expert, perhaps he can tell us more on what he thinks of this issue. Mr. Mock, please. Perhaps I will talk about the technology of electric vehicles nowadays. Right now, we have 40 or so electric taxis in Hong Kong, and the charging, the taxi trade generally thinks that the charging, the time required for charging is rather long, and the driver has to spend 4 to 6 hours to charge up their taxis for a day's work, and therefore. Can electric taxis replace conventional taxis? Perhaps we still have some way to go. But the technologies are advancing day by day, and the charging capacity and charging speed, the recharging speeds are improving. And in 10 or 15 years, we might see great leaps in technologies. And in the future, we might even see replaceable batteries for electric taxis, and it will only take 10 or 15 minutes to replace a battery. So in terms of promoting electric taxis, I'd like to tell you what we're doing. We have a fund to provide subsidy for the trades to pilot test electric taxis. And in certain government car parks, we would vacate certain spaces for the installation of electric charging stations. So how long does it take for a normal charge and a quick charge? Like how much quicker is a quick charge? So first of all, for private vehicles, a normal charge might take 8 hours, and the car can cover 200 kilometers. And for taxis, they have to cover a lot of areas, and for 4 to 6 hours, it can be considered a quick charge. But taxis require a lot of power for a day's work. In government car parks, we are providing quick charge facilities for electric car owners. Mr. Frankie Yik, please. So I'd like to thank everyone for your concerns of diesel taxis. Excuse me, Mr. Yik, since Mr. Wu Chi-wai would like to ask another question, so 3 minutes each. I hope the government can work on it as soon as possible with the diesel taxis. The trade is very concerned with this issue, but they might need to be educated by the government. The peak period for replacing diesel taxis is coming, but from your paper, the transport department is not keeping up with the remote testing, and the car testing centers are not yet equipped with the right equipment. As far as I know, a lot of private car testing centers have mobile devices to carry out the testing. I hope the government can educate the car owners as soon as possible. When the time comes around to test their cars, they have to take their cars to the testing centers. Right now, we don't have enough car testing centers. And if we only have 12 days for the owners to test their vehicles, it might not be there might not be enough time. So, do you have any backup plans? So let me respond to the first question first. For diesel taxis, we have discussed the issue with the trade, and we are open in terms of technology. First, we will assess whether we have these diesel taxis, and we will assess the state of these diesel taxis. And as member said, we will continue to engage the trade, and we will discuss whether mobile testing devices are effective in detecting pollutants such as nitrogen oxides. And we don't want owners to be caught just because they have not done the required testing. And for the testing centers, we do not intend to rent a lot of cars. The emphasis is to encourage owners to carry out maintenance properly. One day, if we have a lot of vehicles lining up for testing, and if such scenario occurs, we might need to extend the testing period. Can you urge the transport department to speed up? Mr. Wishiwai, I have two points. First, according to the existing legislation, we are only allowing petrol and LPG vehicles to carry out the testing. However, as technology is developing at a rapid pace, we need to amend the legislation in order for this to work. Second, you mentioned certain imported diesel taxis, but they might not satisfy Euro 5 or Euro 6 requirements. But for diesel vehicles, we charge less taxes, and that's why the fuel costs are much lower. So in other words, this is like a subsidy. If owners want to import diesel taxis, we should adopt Euro 6 or higher standards rather than Euro 5 standards, so that our subsidy can serve the purpose of achieving a green community. And this way we can make sure that our money goes towards cleaner air for Hong Kong. So I urge the government to adopt a higher standard for diesel taxis of Euro 6 or above. Right now, our existing criterion is that the diesel taxis must be comparable to imported taxis. So not all imported taxis can satisfy our standards. Certain Euro 6 diesel taxis, the taxis must satisfy Euro 6 standards or above before they can be imported to Hong Kong. So are we encouraging taxi owners to import diesel vehicles because of the tax concession? We would look at the issue with the relevant authorities. Right now, the practice only applies to petrol and LPG taxis. When we look at some countries in Europe and Japan, their diesel taxis can't even satisfy the requirements of the LPG taxis in Hong Kong. So right now, it's very expensive to maintain a diesel-driven taxi compared with a petrol or LPG taxi. So some taxi drivers told me not to go back to diesel taxis. They told us not to ask them to revert to diesel taxis. So we are very concerned with this situation as well, and we have analyzed the situation with the trade. Some members of the trades might not understand the scenario very fully. And if their vehicles continue to emit polluting gases, then it would do no benefit to the trade. So you have to open up the legislation to different types of vehicles and not just diesel vehicles. Some taxi drivers told me that for diesel vehicles, if one part goes wrong, then they have to send the whole, they have to change the entire gear. Of course, the technologies are ever changing, so it's very difficult to amend the legislation. So if we can provide a certain degree of flexibility in the law, it would be a better practice in Hong Kong to allow more flexibility. Right now, only two types of vehicles are applicable. So you cannot just look at this sole criterion of emissions. So we are limiting the number, the type of vehicles that can be imported to Hong Kong. Time is very limited today. But the conclusion we have today is that we have no flexibility in the law. You are not keeping up with the market. And this is not ideal to operators and consumers. So can the government go back and look at the law? I'm no expert, but I will go back and discuss with Mr. Mok and the relevant officials. But I don't agree with your interpretation, Chairman. Different drivers have different opinions. But after further elaboration from the government, I trust that the government is authoritative in these issues. I agree with Mr. Wu Chi-wai that we should relax the criteria. But do we really need to amend the legislation on the short term? This is something we might not agree. So I prefer that we take some time to review the practice. Legislation amendments can never keep up with changes in the society because it takes time to amend the law. So my point is, can we allow some flexibility in the law? Mr. Frankie Yek, please be brief. I follow up on these issues between the trade and the government, and I will discuss with the trade if there is a need. I will continue to follow up with the government. So the meeting is that's it for the meeting today. Thank you.